Cassidy Reynolds rushed through the bustling concourse of Metro International Airport, her heart pounding as she clutched a small carry-on bag. The morning light filtered in through towering glass walls, painting the busy terminal in a soft golden glow. Taxis screeched to a halt outside, and the hum of rolling suitcases and excited chatter mingled with the occasional roar of an airplane engine. Amid the frenzy of hurried passengers, a commotion had erupted at one of the boarding gates. A stern-faced security officer was blocking a determined black woman from boarding her flight. The woman, dressed in simple navy trousers and a pastel blouse, stood calm and resolute as the officer barked at her to step aside. His voice was loud enough to halt conversations and freeze the expressions of those nearby. To everyone watching, it appeared as if she were causing a disruption, yet behind her composed exterior lay a secret that no one suspected. This unassuming traveler was actually the chief executive of one of the nation's prominent regional airlines, a fact that would soon upend the officer's assumptions. Officer Randall Bishop, a tall man with an athletic build and a reputation for being relentless in his duty, had spent more than a decade patrolling the terminals. He prided himself on maintaining order, often relying on quick judgments about the people he encountered. Over the years, his instinct had grown dangerously tinted with bias, a predisposition that made him view certain travelers with unwarranted suspicion. That morning, Bishop's heightened alert was fueled by a vague tip of potential contraband smuggling or suspicious activity. With his eyes darting from face to face, he scrutinized every detail, convinced that danger lurked in the most ordinary of actions. In the midst of the long line at Security Checkpoint C, the woman caught Bishop's attention as she stooped gracefully to help an elderly gentleman untie his worn shoes. Her gesture, simple yet sincere, set off an alarm in his mind. He wondered, without any real evidence, whether there was more to her than met the eye. His gut told him that her composed demeanor might be concealing something far more significant. With his hand gripping the radio at his side, he made a decision to keep a close watch on her. Unbeknownst to him, the woman was none other than Cassidy Reynolds, CEO of Clear Skies Airlines, though she had purposefully concealed her identity. For months, Cassidy had been flying undercover, posing as an everyday passenger in order to gauge the true state of her company's operations. Complaints about unprofessional behavior and substandard service had reached her ears, prompting her to embark on this covert mission. By traveling incognito, she hoped to identify the real issues behind the polished facade of airline service, from flight attendants' courtesy to the efficacy of check-in procedures. After her quiet act of kindness at security, Cassidy moved toward gate D-17, where Clear Skies Airlines Flight 278 was scheduled to board. As she stepped into the congested boarding area, the ambient noise of overhead announcements and murmured greetings filled the space. A tired yet courteous gate agent named Lara Hughes was busy assisting passengers, offering apologies for minor glitches in the electronic system that had briefly disrupted the boarding passes of an elderly couple. Although visibly stressed, Lara maintained a professional air that reassured the waiting traveler. Cassidy scanned the scene with practiced neutrality, mentally noting every detail: the slightly frazzled agent, the relieved smiles of passengers receiving corrected passes, and the subtle shifts of tension when Randall Bishop appeared in the periphery of the crowd. The officer's piercing gaze lingered on her as if trying to decipher a secret she refused to reveal. His suspicion was aroused not by any overt misbehavior, but by a vague impression that those who appeared too composed were often hiding something significant. When it was time for boarding to commence, Cassidy joined the line with measured calm. Lara Hughes requested a recheck of boarding passes and identification, a routine procedure that suddenly felt targeted. With a slight frown, Bishop motioned her aside, insisting on a private conversation. Cassidy's composed response, "Certainly," belied the rising tension that rippled through the gathering crowd. She followed him, her footsteps steady despite the undercurrent of anxiety. In a quiet corner near a row of large windows overlooking the runway, the confrontation unfolded. Bishop's tone was clipped and formal as he asked, "I need to ensure everything is in order. You traveled alone, correct? And that's your only piece of luggage?" Cassidy's reply was measured and polite, confirming the details without betraying any hint of her true identity. Bishop's eyes narrowed as he scrutinized her belongings. A neatly zipped bag containing a modest selection of clothes, a tablet, a small toiletry case, and a few documents that, unbeknownst to him, held the operational secrets of Clear Skies Airlines. Flipping through the contents with the air of a detective, Bishop's suspicions only grew when he encountered a set of papers with flight schedules and company memos. "These look official," he muttered, his voice edged with uncertainty. Cassidy nodded in acknowledgement, her face a mask of calm determination. "Yes, I work in the aviation industry," she said, offering no further explanation. In Bishop's mind, this admission only deepened the mystery. He was convinced that a simple gate agent or an ordinary employee wouldn't be traveling under a false name, yet here she was, boarding as an unremarkable traveler. His preconceived notions, rooted in years of unchecked bias, clouded his judgment. After what seemed like an eternity, Bishop reluctantly returned her documents, his demeanor suggesting that he would keep a watchful eye on her for the remainder of the boarding process. "All right, I'll be watching," he declared in a tone that mingled authority with a sense of self-righteous vindication. Cassidy accepted his words with a courteous nod and rejoined the line, the eyes of curious onlookers following her every step. Inside the aircraft, Cassidy settled into seat 2B, a business-class seat by the window, with practiced ease. The plush environment and the courteous greeting from a flight attendant named Marissa provided a momentary distraction from the earlier ordeal. As the plane ascended, the cityscape receded into a miniature tapestry below, and Cassidy briefly allowed herself a moment of reflection. She reviewed her mental checklist, the quality of in-flight service, the responsiveness of the cabin crew, and the overall efficiency of the operation, all details she would later report to her board. But even thousands of feet in the air, the memory of Bishop's suspicious stare lingered like a dark cloud over her mission. A text message from a trusted colleague popped up on her phone, a reminder that her covert inspection was under close watch. Cassidy quickly switched her phone to airplane mode and tucked it away, unwilling to let even a hint of distraction interfere with her objective. With each bite of her slightly overcooked omelet, she took note of the meal's quality and the attentiveness of Marissa, her observations both candid and precise. The flight, though occasionally disrupted by mild turbulence, proceeded smoothly as the aircraft cruised steadily toward its destination. Meanwhile, back at the terminal, Officer Bishop's vigilance did not wane. After the plane departed, he conferred with gate staff, probing for more details about the enigmatic passenger who had triggered his suspicion. His inquiries revealed that Cassidy's travel details were linked to Clear Skies Airlines, a fact that only fueled his determination to unearth what he believed was a covert operation gone awry. Though his superiors had often cautioned him against relying on unverified hunches, Bishop's mind was already a jumble of biases and assumptions, convinced that he was the sole guardian of airport security. As Cassidy's flight descended toward its destination, the accumulated tension from the morning's events began to dissipate, replaced by a renewed focus on her mission. After landing, she retrieved her small suitcase and navigated the now quieter corridors of the terminal. It was then that she encountered Bishop once again. Standing against a column near the baggage claim, his expression was inscrutable as he watched the flow of disembarking passengers. When their eyes met, Cassidy's pulse quickened. She wondered if this confrontation would mark another chapter in what was quickly becoming a personal battle. Summoning her courage, Cassidy approached him. "Officer Bishop," she said, her voice steady but firm, "I understand you have questions." The officer's eyes flickered with a mix of disbelief and irritation as he replied, "Yes, we need to talk. You were detained earlier, and I still have questions about who you really are." Cassidy's calm retort cut through the tension. "I have nothing to hide. I provided my ID and boarding pass. If you have a complaint, please file it through the proper channels." Yet Bishop's suspicion burned on. His tone grew colder as he suggested, "Let's go to the security office so we can sort this out properly." A few nearby passengers paused, sensing that a confrontation was unfolding. Despite the crowded terminal, Cassidy's composure did not waver. "If that's what you insist," she replied, "but know that I will be calling my lawyer if necessary." The officer's smirk, intended to belittle her, only hardened her resolve. Together, they walked down a narrow corridor that led to a small, sterile room where a security supervisor was waiting. The room, lit by harsh fluorescent lights, seemed to heighten the gravity of the moment. Bishop's questions continued in a measured yet accusatory tone, probing her identity and her reasons for traveling alone. Without a uniform or any obvious sign of corporate affiliation, Cassidy's responses were succinct but unwavering. She refused to reveal the entirety of her undercover operation, though every word she spoke was laden with quiet authority. The conversation reached a turning point when Bishop, now visibly rattled, was confronted with a digital file on Cassidy's phone. With a few deliberate taps, she displayed an official document, the very contract that confirmed her position as CEO of Clear Skies Airlines. For a long, breathless moment, Bishop's expression shifted from arrogance to incredulity. "A CEO?" he stuttered, the disbelief in his voice barely masked by his stubborn pride. Cassidy's response was measured. "Yes, I am, and I travel incognito so that I may understand the true experiences of our passengers firsthand." In that instant, the power dynamics in the room shifted irrevocably. The security supervisor, who had been silently observing, interjected with a firm, "Officer Bishop, you have no authority to detain Ms. Reynolds further without cause." His tone left no room for argument. With a final, sharp glance at the subdued officer, the supervisor instructed Bishop to leave immediately. Reluctantly, and with as much dignity as he could muster under the circumstances, Bishop exited the room, leaving Cassidy standing amid a mix of relief and simmering indignation. Outside the room, the corridors of the terminal seemed charged with an unspoken energy as Cassidy collected her thoughts. She felt a surge of vindication, tempered by the knowledge that her ordeal had already made its way into the public sphere. Whispers among travelers grew into murmurs of outrage as details of the incident spread. In the hours that followed, Cassidy's phone was inundated with messages. Some congratulating her bravery, others condemning the actions of a security officer who had misused his authority. It was clear that her encounter was about to become a national talking point. Later that evening, after a brief respite in a quiet airport lounge, Cassidy rebooked her flight back to her corporate headquarters. She spent the waiting hours drafting meticulous notes about the incident, the unprofessional conduct, the baseless suspicions, and the clear display of racial prejudice that had marred what should have been a routine travel experience. Determined to transform her personal trial into a catalyst for change, she prepared to confront the broader issues of discrimination within both the aviation industry and law enforcement. As her flight took off under a starlit sky, Cassidy allowed herself a moment to reflect on the implications of the day's events. Her thoughts were interrupted by a call from her assistant, who confirmed that news of the incident was already making headlines online. Social media was abuzz, with hashtags calling for accountability and reform, and local news outlets had begun reporting on the episode, though the officer's name was only mentioned in hushed tone. Cassidy knew that the publicity could either help spark meaningful change or embroil her company in an unwanted scandal. She resolved, however, that exposing this injustice was a risk worth taking. Landing back at her home airport, Cassidy was greeted by a mix of respectful nods and curious glances from fellow travelers. In the days that followed, she held discreet meetings with senior staff and managers, gathering further insights into the operational deficiencies that had prompted her undercover trips. Her approach was always measured and empathetic. She encouraged honesty and openness, knowing that the truth could only be uncovered when people were free to speak without fear of retribution. As she listened to the accounts of overworked employees and frustrated passengers, her determination to implement lasting changes in the company's policies grew stronger. Unbeknownst to Cassidy, however, Officer Bishop had not faded into obscurity. Back in his small apartment, Bishop sat alone in the dim light of his living room, watching news reports that condemned his actions. The headlines screamed of racial profiling and abuse of power, and images of protests outside the airport flashed across the screen. The public outrage was swift and unforgiving. His superiors had already placed him on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. Bishop's mind raced as he replayed the events over and over, each recollection marred by the realization that his own biases had led him astray. No longer shielded by the veneer of authority, he was forced to confront the harsh reality of his actions. Days later, in a packed hearing room at the city's police headquarters, Bishop faced a panel of officials. His record, once considered a badge of honor, now stood as evidence of a pattern of behavior that many deemed unacceptable. The panel listened intently as testimony from Cassidy's account, along with statements from the security supervisor and other witnesses, painted a damning portrait of unchecked prejudice. Despite his attempts to defend his actions as routine vigilance, the weight of the evidence was too great. In a final, resounding verdict, the panel terminated Bishop's employment, signaling not only a personal downfall, but also a broader call for reform within the department. For Cassidy, the ordeal was bittersweet. While she felt a measure of satisfaction at the accountability Bishop now faced, the incident had also laid bare the systemic issues that persisted in both aviation security and law enforcement. Determined to channel the experience into positive change, she spearheaded new initiatives at Clear Skies Airlines. Under her leadership, the company launched an extensive training program focused on eliminating implicit bias among staff, revamped protocols for passenger interactions, and established a dedicated advocacy team to safeguard the rights and dignity of every traveler. In the months that followed, the story of the officer who had wrongfully detained a high-powered executive became a symbol of the need for reform. Cassidy traveled frequently, though now with a new sense of purpose. Even when she flew incognito on routine trips, her eyes were open, always ready to spot discrepancies and ensure that no traveler was ever treated with disrespect or prejudice. Along the way, she encountered other passengers whose stories resonated with her own, each one a reminder of the work that still lay ahead. One morning, while waiting at the gate for a routine flight, Cassidy noticed a young black woman fumbling with her boarding pass. The anxiety on the young traveler's face was unmistakable, and in that moment, Cassidy recognized a reflection of her own experiences, a shared struggle against the quiet injustices that many endured. Stepping forward, Cassidy offered a reassuring smile and helped the young woman resolve the issue with the gate agent. The relief in the young traveler's eyes filled Cassidy with a quiet pride. Her personal ordeal had sparked a larger movement, inspiring those who had long felt marginalized to speak out and demand fair treatment. As weeks turned into months, the fallout from that fateful day continued to ripple across the community. Media outlets chronicled Cassidy's journey from a private executive to a public advocate for change, and the narrative of a determined woman fighting against systemic discrimination resonated with audiences nationwide. While some critics questioned the methods and timing of her undercover mission, the overwhelming majority saw it as a bold step toward accountability, a demonstration that no one, regardless of their status, was above scrutiny when it came to upholding fairness and dignity. Cassidy Reynolds' experience transformed her from a distant corporate figure into a symbol of resilience and integrity. In her eyes, the true measure of leadership lay not in the power one wielded, but in the willingness to confront injustice wherever it was found, even if it meant facing personal hardship in the process. And while the scars of that day would linger in the memories of those involved, Cassidy's commitment to change had already set in motion a series of reforms that promised to reshape the landscape of air travel and law enforcement alike. In the quiet moments after a long day of meetings and media interviews, Cassidy would sometimes reflect on the delicate balance between authority and empathy. The memory of Officer Bishop's baseless suspicion, once a source of deep frustration, had become a catalyst for transformation. A stark reminder that the fight against prejudice was not only necessary but inevitable. As she prepared for another undercover flight, she carried with her the lessons learned from that encounter. The importance of vigilance, the courage to speak up, and the unyielding belief that every traveler deserved respect, regardless of their appearance or background. And so, amid the relentless pace of airport terminals and the ever-changing faces of passengers, Cassidy Reynolds continued her mission. With each flight, she sought to uncover the unvarnished truth of the airline experience, determined to ensure that no one would ever have to endure the indignity of being judged solely by the color of their skin. Her journey was far from over, but every mile traveled, every interaction recorded, and every life touched served as a testament to the power of courage and the promise of a fairer, more compassionate future. In the end, the story of that fateful morning at Metro International Airport was not just about a mistaken identity or a misguided act of authority. It was a story of transformation. It was the story of a woman who turned adversity into an opportunity for growth, and of an institution forced to reckon with the realities of its own shortcomings. Cassidy Reynolds had taken flight that day not only to catch her scheduled plane, but also to soar above the limitations of prejudice, charting a course toward a future where every traveler's dignity was upheld and every voice was heard.